Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to thank you for joining us for today's Day on Capitol Hill pre-conference webinar. I'm Michelle Whitaker, Events Manager for the Electronic Security Association. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. All callers will be muted for the duration of the webinar, so please be sure to use your question or chat log to submit questions throughout the call today. Additionally, a recording of the webinar will be available on the Day on Capitol Hill events page on esaweb.org. I'd like to introduce Lynn Comer, our chair of the ESA Government Relations Committee. Lynn?
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to all those who are taking the time out of their busy day to attend this webinar. You know, we are posed again to for our annual trek to Capitol Hill. For those of you who are veterans at this, you already know the value of attending. I can't tell you how many times I have personally heard the importance of having, you know, these personal visits with our representatives or their assistants and legislative aides. It does have a major impact. If you have not ever attended, I can assure you that you will not feel uncomfortable. John and Zach both do an excellent job of pairing up teams as they approach these meetings. So you will only be a new person once, because once you've gone, you'll understand how comfortable you will be made to feel. If you have not already registered and are thinking of registering, please contact Michelle. She can help you with both the registration process as well as any accommodations that you might need. Michelle Whitaker can be reached at 972-807-6807. I'll repeat that, 972-807-6807. In order to make the best use of time, I'm going to turn this over to John Chwat, and if someone would change our screen. John is going to go through the major talking points for this year's event, and what we will do is we will go over each item. If you have any questions at the completion of each item, please don't hesitate to either write them in for us, and we will get to them after we have covered each item, instead of trying to bulk all the questions at the end. So without further ado, John Chwat, if you would like to go over legislative action, item number 1, please.
Yes, I'd be happy to. I want to thank ESA for this opportunity. What we're going to do in a limited time frame is to condense the 4 major issues that we're addressing in 2013's Day on Capitol Hill. Obviously, if you visit a congressman or a senator and you want to bring up one or more of these 4 issues, this would help ESA in its legislative priorities. But if you have other issues and the member asks the question, what else do you want to talk about, you can feel free to describe the connections that you have back in the district and the state and the importance of the industry to consumers and public safety. Our number 1 issue, which we have had legislation introduced in several Congresses, is a very straightforward bill. It is introduced in the House. We will soon have it introduced in the Senate. The bill itself goes to the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, those are 2 committees in Congress, if you've been reading the newspapers, that have had high on their agenda background checks dealing with guns and the immigration debate. Traditionally, The Judiciary Committees are very active committees. When you go up to Capitol Hill this year, those are the two primary issues that will be addressed. It just so happens that this year, different than the last 5 or 6 years, federal background checks as it relates to guns has been a very, very highly visible issue. Our legislation has absolutely nothing to do with guns, and that should be made very clear right off the bat. Our legislation has been consistent throughout the introductions of the bills over the years. It will be the same principally in the House. It will be the same in the Senate. What it does is it permits the electronic life safety and security industry to access the FBI federal background check database. And I have said over the years that we've had this legislation, that there are 27 states presently that do not have an ability or a requirement or a mandate to permit access within those states to the FBI database. These 27 states they're on our website. If anyone wants to know, have a list of them. Some of them are very large states, such as Pennsylvania and Ohio. But these states, if a person who has a felony or a particular problem in their background, and they go from state to state, since there is not a licensing provision or a state legislative mandate that permits the collection of fingerprint IDs, there's no way to know as an employer whether that person has such a record. And therefore, it is imperative for these 27 states initially to be permitted to access the FBI database. According to the statutes, federal statutes, state legislatures and law enforcement, different communities can access FBI databases. But if a private industry wants to secure access to the FBI federal database, they have to receive permission from Congress to do so. And again, over the years, we have listed some of these groups, whether they're child or elderly care, commodity futures, banking, securities, aviation, nursing homes, whatever the private sector area, there have been statutes that have been reviewed by Congress and approved by Congress to permit these industries to access the FBI database. The most recent and hotly contested such statute was by the private security guard industry, which only secured their statute back in 2004 after trying for 6 or 7 years. And even to this day, 9 years later, almost 10 years later, the original statute that they had passed has many problems, and they're seeking to make changes to it. So it's not an easy fix, but over the years we have found that the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee does not readily grant these kind of access for a variety of reasons. It could be that they want to make sure that the industry merits the access, and of course we do. And they also have on their agenda other items. We want to make sure this particular legislation passes this session. The bill that you see on your screen, H.R. 1441, is the legislation that was introduced this month, again by our supporter, Congressman Luke DeMeyer, a Republican from Missouri. The House is controlled by Republicans. This session, due to leadership and rule requirements, many of the leadership in the House Judiciary Committee, where this bill is pending, has changed. Some of you might recall that Lamar Smith from Texas, was chairman of the Judiciary Committee last year. He went on to become chairman of another committee, and this year Lynn, Comer's congressman, actually from Virginia, is chair of the Judiciary Committee, Congressman Goodlatte, and Congressman Goodlatte is a former co-sponsor of the same bill last session, which we will, of course, make sure that he supports and moves this bill expeditiously through the process. There are approximately 40 congressmen, both Republican and Democrat, who serve on this committee. They are the ones that are going to decide whether this bill passes the committee and is sent to the floor of the House for consideration. Therefore, our targets are those 40. Even though people who attend this day on Capitol Hill may be in a state in which the state already permits the access to the federal database, for the entire industry, this is a very important and a very worthwhile bill to pass, and it has some major implications, if it does pass, to permit other applications as we proceed during the session. In the Senate, our sponsor is Senator Schumer, and of course he's a little bit busy with immigration and gun issues. Senator Schumer serves as a leader in the Senate Democrats. Democrats control the Senate. He was our sponsor last year. He does not have any difficulty in reintroducing the legislation this year. We believe that he will be instrumental in scheduling a vote on the legislation, which we were successful last session in having him move the bill through the committee process. There was not time enough to have it passed in the Senate and sent to the House, but according to our process, we will expedite that once the Senate bill is introduced. With the H.R. 1441, I wanted to take a moment to go over the provisions quickly of the bill. The legislation in the beginning has what's called findings. If you review the legislation, which I believe is on our website for ESA, there are some 4 major findings about the electronic life safety and security industry, and it just shows to the Congress and to the people that are reviewing the bill the importance of this bill for those states who do not provide licensing and need access for the to the FBI database. H.R. 1441, by the way, will be in each of your packets so that you can review the bill, and of course these white papers at leisure. The next is definitions. The definition of the type of electronic life safety and security industry who are applicable to this permission that Congress must give to the FBI is very broad, and it includes all electronic life safety and security system installation. It does include central monitoring of fire and burglar alarm systems to public and private entities, including fire alarms, burglar alarms, smoke detection, closed-circuit TV, biometric systems, access control, personal emergency response systems, and other crime prevention systems. We made it all-inclusive because in the last 2 or 3 months that we were negotiating and receiving input from both the House and Senate Judiciary staff and the FBI and the Justice Department, many of these provisions are included in this bill at their request. So it's a very broad definition. It does have definitions that talk about employees and prospective employees. The actual purpose of the bill is on page 4. It says that within 180 days of passage, the Attorney General shall establish a method to permit covered entities to request actually an access to the federal fingerprint identification system. This essentially means that this bill is the essence of the bill is really in this one paragraph, and that is that once a bill passes Congress, it is up to the federal agency, in this case the Department of Justice through the Attorney General, to develop detailed regulations to implement the method by which ESA and industry employers can access the criminal database. These regulations, once this bill passes the Congress, it has always been our intention to develop a high-level delegation to visit with the Attorney General and the Assistant Attorney Generals that will be responsible for drafting these regulations, and this would be the next step after the bill passes in Congress. The rest of the bill you can read. There were several provisions that were included by the minority in the House and the majority of the Senate relating to employees' opportunity to challenge or withdraw consent. We did not advocate for these provisions, but in order to placate and to move the bill, as you know, Congress is a give-and-take place, I guess it is nowadays, that these provisions were added to the bill. The bill's passage will relate to three issues. The first is how many co-sponsors we can gather in a period of time by which the House and Senate Judiciary Committees can move the bill. Last year, we were not able to get hundreds of co-sponsors, but there are 218 congressmen in the House that constitute the majority of the House out of 435. So to get as many co-sponsors as possible, every single congressional delegation from those 27 states and from the efforts of the people that attend this day on Capitol Hill, if all of these congressmen in the House co-sponsor it, it will signal to the chairman and to the other members of the committee that the bill is of importance to their colleagues, and it'll start moving and being voted on and sent to the floor. The second is to make a good case. Most of the congressmen that attendees have met with over the years, they're all in favor of it. When everybody goes home and we're trying to get this bill passed, for one reason or another, due to time problems, they don't see a priority. This is a priority, and Boston and the terrorist events there, and public safety, and the ability to make sure that installers and employees do not have records, both felony and other types of records, to protect the public, should be a #1 priority, since we are a #1 industry that relates to security in the United States. So this must be made clear to the visits that you make in the Congress this next month. And the last, most important, is that we have found that there's not very much opposition to this concept. After all, who would be opposed to us getting access to the FBI database? The only two things that came up last year was there is a background check industry, which is private sector, and our bill specifically targets the FBI database and in no way harms an employer. The ability to contract with these private entities, and actually there is no opposition that we know of right now to the legislation. So as far as HR 1441, I think we are ready to go to the next screen.
Okay, just one moment, John. We have a question. It's from Maria. If this bill passes and we are able to go directly to the FBI for the background check, will we get a number or something that we can use in the different states that require the background check so that we don't have to keep doing fingerprints?
Yes, the detail as far as as far as I understand it, the details on the methods about how to require a background check, which is also in the bill. It's very general. And the procedures for once you acquire a background check, who can, make sure that there's no problem in another state. That will come out in the regulations that will be printed. Inside the bill, there is a there is a provision that relates to it says make determinations regarding whether the criminal history record received in response to the background check, that the employee or prospective employee has a criminal history for the during the last 10-year period before the background check is conducted. These specific things, Maria, in answer to your question, will be worked out in regulations. It's not in the legislation per se. But we are very, very hopeful that the regulations will permit recognition across state lines for that kind of a background check.
Okay, so, if this thing should pass, and this is a comment, members can expect to, realize some savings of time and resources for not having to run the print several times per year for the same person in different states. Correct?
Between all of us, that's correct. I'm not sitting opposite the Attorney General, so the Attorney General is the one that's going to be writing the regulations, and our supporters in Congress will have to make it very clear what it is that we want as the bill proceeds. Usually a bill, when it's passed by a committee, includes what we call a report, and inside the report is the legislative intent of the bill, and we would make sure that once this bill starts to move, that these items, the one that Maria brought up, the one you just talked about, which is the same, would be included in that report so that the Attorney General understands the congressional intent.
Okay. And the last point, I think, I think this one should be of interest to everyone. Have there been any credible objections to H.R. 1441 in its past formats or in current format?
I don't really believe that, aside from small details in the bill, aside from the fact that some of the minority, meaning the Democrats in the House and probably the Democrats in the Senate, their focus is on the rights of employees. Aside from those items, we have not uncovered any problems. It's really a scheduling problem, and it's a perception problem that our industry is not as important, say, as daycare centers or summer camps or that kind of thing. So it is very, very important to relay information to the visits that we set up for the attendees during this day on Capitol Hill, that we want all House members at this point to co-sponsor H.R. 1441. We are hopeful to get the Senate number at that time, so all senators should support the bill. In fact, they could even say that they should support the bill that will be introduced by Senator Schumer, and two, that you want this bill to pass quickly, since it's imperative for public safety purposes, and get that commitment from those particular members or staff people that you visit, and relay that information to us as soon as possible during the debriefing.
Okay, are there any other questions on item number 1, which is House Bill 1441? Okay, John, if we could move on to item number 2 then, please.
Okay, item number 2 is very self-explanatory, and we've included this in every day on Capitol Hill because we are the only association in the nation's capital, and indeed in the United States, that has advocated for a balanced approach between suppression and detection. And so what does that mean? That means that we have a white paper, position paper on this, which will be included in the packets. It is basically a 3-page position paper to Congress, saying in essence to these staff people and to these congressmen, when you are approached by, say, this suppression or even the fire community, you should know that there is another voice that deals with fire detection. And we advocate not ignoring the suppression or sprinkler issue. Ours is a very broad, positive request that if they're considering legislation that mandates or provides tax incentives or mandates sprinkle or suppression equipment, that there is an additional option to be reviewed, and ESA is the go-to association for this balanced approach. This is very important because it is widely believed that 2013 and probably 2014, as we progress through the congressional session, that the sprinkler community will be active on Capitol Hill, and we do distribute and interact with staff that support the Congressional Fire Service Caucus, which is very, very powerful on Capitol Hill, that interacts with the international fire chiefs, international fire marshals, and in general supports the legislative positions of the fire community, which we are doing as well, and so is ESA top leadership. And second, we sent out a memoranda just last week in which a bill that was introduced by a congresswoman, a Democrat in the House from Ohio, dealt with a grant program for colleges and universities to install fire suppression systems and secure money from the Department of Education for this purpose. Now the bill itself is not the be-all and end-all, but what was significant to us was buried inside on page 2, that in order to secure a grant from a federal agency for this purpose in the college, that an automatic fire sprinkler system, comma, a fire and smoke alarm and detection system, comma, and a mass communication system that can be used in the event of a fire would be approved as a fire suppression system. Now, for people who come and go to Washington, that may not seem to be important, but for our industry, that is. And that's the first sign that the fire community, in which they have highly supported this particular congresswoman, has included both of the detection and suppression. So that's an example of what we're trying to work towards here, and it is important. We have networked with many of the manufacturer community to make sure that the technology is available, and I do believe that ESA is gaining a reputation for that particular balanced approach.
Okay. Have you heard any objections, again, credible objections to our being, included next to suppression?
Well, when you mention the word credible, the only concern that we have uncovered the last 3.5 years was the sprinkler community. The suppression community in the states has advocated legislatively, of course, for mandating in residences and commercial operations fire sprinkler equipment. At a federal level, it is not the same. On a federal level, you know, some of the priorities that we've uncovered the last 2 or 3 years relates to the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and Homeland Security has a U.S. Fire Administration, and there is legislation every year that relates to that U.S. Fire Administration. It is a major training and technology development area for the fire community, and there have been instances where there's been federal legislation that talks about you know, looking at mandating suppression. So we had a little pushback from the sprinkler community, and the only other pushback would be from the fire community, in which they have been highly influenced by suppression. So the attendees at the day in Washington, if they echo this balanced approach, it helps us in our networking on this particular issue by showing that there's an alternative out there.
Okay. Are there any questions on item number 2? We don't want to keep you too far over our allotted time.
Gotcha. Okay, on the third issue, again, this is very self-explanatory. As a result of Newtown and Columbine and all the other school safety issues, this is a hot-button issue up in the Congress. There has been articles, and I'm sure that you have read them in the trade press, and major initiatives relating to school safety. There is some legislation that is pending in the Congress, not totally applicable to our particular area, but for example, Senator Barbara Boxer last month introduced the School Safety Act, and it includes providing schools with resources, meaning money, to install classroom locks and lighting and fencing, reinforced doors, including installation of surveillance equipment and detectors. We will have as handouts some of the initiatives that we have found around the country. They're listed there. There's, you know, there are some on the screen. School procurement of security is a local school district issue, and the only way Congress gets involved with schools these days is by the Congress allocating grant money and funds to these school districts. And so we want you to be able to bring this out as a possible hot topic.
Are there any questions on item number 3 so far?
Okay, item number 4, moving right along. Item number 4 is a future hot issue. And I won't say too much because we have a time limit here, only to the extent that ESA works with AICC, the Alarm Industry Communications Committee, which represents the entire alarm industry and electronic security industry. And we were able at their meeting to secure a letter to the Federal Trade Commission to review activities of AT&T around the country in the legislative and regulatory area. I will report more on that next week. And we'll have a letter that we will request congressmen and senators to send to the Federal Trade Commission supporting ESA and AICC's initiative.
Any questions on item number 4? This, as John said, this is a very hot topic, and it's going right across the country with AT&T. So when we attend our briefing, this, John will have more information for you, but this will be big. Any questions on item number 4, the AT&T situation? If not, Michelle, do you want to go through the schedule of events?
Sure. Our registration will be at the St. Gregory Hotel on Monday, May 6th. We'll start with registration, obviously, at 1. At 3:30, we have a Government Relations Committee meeting, also at the St. Gregory. At 5 o'clock, we will have prep talk for the walk with John Chwat. As soon as that is over, we will depart for the Sequoia restaurant for dinner, and we have our Congressman Chris Gibson as our featured speaker, and then our transportation will take us back to the St. Gregory Hotel that evening. On Tuesday morning, we will have our breakfast from 8 to 9 at the St. Gregory. We will depart for the Hill at the buses will be there about 9, so we'll be leaving at 9:15. Go to our congressional visits. We'll convene at the Capitol Hill Club at noon, where we will have lunch, and we have 2 speakers at our lunch. We will have Sam Graves and Blaine Lukemeyer. We also go back to our visits, during the afternoon. Things are just a tad bit different this year. For our first-time attendees, it won't, make any difference to you, but for everybody else, generally we convene close to the Hill. This year we are not doing that. We are going back to the hotel between 3 and 5 when you're finished with your appointments. There will not be transportation, so you will just need to take a taxi and get back to St. Gregory's. We'll have a debriefing there from 3 to 5. And then at 5 o'clock, we will have our reception in the M Street Grill, or I'm sorry, it's 21M Lounge. It's just in the hotel to the left when you first walk in. It's opposite of the bar, so we'll have a lovely reception there. Any questions? Okay. Lynn?
I'm all set. Does anyone have any questions about the event in general?
Nope.
If not,
I guess we have no questions.
Okay. If not, I'd like to thank you all for attending, and thank you for John for organizing another anticipated successful event.
Thank you, John. If anybody needs to contact John, here is his contact information. He has all of his cell numbers, phone numbers, emails, everything. So if we don't have any other questions, I think we're done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.